अरे यार बाहर मत निकाला
I think we'll take the photographs after the session with Sharmila. Please do take your seats. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second day of the Khushwant Singh Literary Festival. We have a lot of interesting sessions lined up for today, and we begin with the star attraction of the day, none other than La Tagore. The very name inspires awe and respect. Respect for the body and range of work she has done over 60 years, the risky and tough roles she chose, the finesse with which she portrayed them, all straddling the spectrum opposites of the artistic Bengali film world and the commercial Bombay film industry with apparent ease. Sharmila Tagore's entire life has a fairy tale feel to it, beginning with the Tagore lineage, launched by the film Maestro Shotruji Trai in Apur Sansar, her commercial successes in the Bombay film industry, in which she stood out for her independence and modern ways, and finally her marriage to another Indian favourite, cricket icon Mansoor Ali Khan Patodi. She remains a woman to reckon with, a woman of substance. Without much ado, I would like to call La Tagore, Sharmila, to grace the stage, and I don't want to commit the sin of standing any longer between you and her. And I also call upon Shantanu Rai Chaudhary to chat up the charming and disarming Sharmila Tagore. Shantanu is the executive editor at Penguin Random House and has worked on several books on Bollywood. Please give them a big hand.
I love your introduction. Huh? So, which is the better part, the La or the Tagore? The La Tagore was coined by none other than Shobha De. When she started doing this Asli Ghi and La Tagore and brought this kind of identity to us. Yeah? Yeah?
Thank you all and a very good morning. It's wonderful to see this packed stage, and thanks to KSLITFEST and to Nilofer and Rahul and everybody here for the invite and for allowing us to have this conversation. Would you like to say a few words before we...
No, of course. I so appreciate what Rahul Singh has done by initiating this and instituting this series, this LitFest, in honor of his father, none other than Khushwant Singh. And I wonder what he would have said, while, you know, there's so much to talk about, and he's somebody who didn't really mince words, and he said it how it was, which nowadays we don't have the courage to say so. So one misses him.
Yeah,
really.
I think
really.
You would have a lot to say about, you know, vamps in Hindi
I'm
cinema.
I'm sure. I mean, had he been here interviewing me, it would have been quite... But, you know, I would have been totally overshadowed, that I wouldn't have liked that very much.
Many of us here will be aware of the fact that...
I just want to say something.
Yeah.
Sorry. I hope I won't do this again.
No, absolutely.
I just want to say how much I appreciated Gurleen's song. Recently I was in Bombay or Mumbai, whichever way you say, depending, you know, how old you are. I call it still Bombay. And I met, it was my granddaughter's, my daughter's daughter, Soha's daughter, Inaya's birthday. And I asked her, I said, on the 2nd of October, whose birthday it is, because they're very, very keen on birthdays. And she didn't have a clue, of course, and the parents hadn't told her. So I said, it's Gandhiji's birthday. So they looked at me vaguely. She's only 2 years old. So then I taught her Raghupati Raghav, Raja Ram, and Ishwara Allah Tera Ram. And so I sort of recall that because it just happened today. And thank you, Gurleen, for setting the tone. And, it's a very good beginning. Ishwara Allah Tero Naam. Isn't it?
Absolutely.
Something we should talk about. So sorry, I will not interrupt you again.
No. I think they would love you to interrupt because they're here for you. So a lot of us here will be aware of the fact that 2019 is 60 years of Sharmila Tagore's first film, Opu Shongshar, The World of Opu by Satyajit Ray. So it's 60 years that she has been around. It's also 50 years of probably your biggest commercial success, Aradhana? 69, yeah. So 50 years. So between Opu Shongshar and Aradhana and 50 and 60 years, it's been quite a journey. Can you just give us a snapshot of the changes that, I know that could take 50 minutes, but...
No, like you said, snapshot. We are all used to selfie time now, and 3 minutes bite. Television doesn't allow you more than that, but I hope I'll get a little bit more time than that. Yes, well, I've enjoyed every minute of it, and there has been huge changes, of course. I mean, I look like that then, and I look like this now. So I started 60 years ago with Satyajit Ray. In a film called Opu Shongshar. He was looking for a child bride, and I think he had scouts in front of all the schools or wherever children go, and somebody found me, and the next day the phone rang and my father was asked that would I be interested working with Satyajit Ray. And at that time he was winning all the awards, international awards, and he was not like a run-of-the-mill director. He was different. I mean, he kind of pioneered a new wave of films, and he was India's flag bearer
And
abroad and remained like that for 40 years. Because before that, the films that were going abroad were very different. So the world sat up and took note of the films that were coming out of Satyajit Ray's camp. So that was a privilege to work with him, personally and professionally. But my school didn't think so. So I'm talking about the mindset that existed 60 years ago, where films was a very bad thing. And not just films, working women. I mean, Mrinal Sen's film have shown, really dwelt on this working women, that they earned, they worked, but they were not really respected, and it was a bad thing. And working in films was doubly bad. So my principal took a kind of a moral stand, took a contrary stand, and said she has to choose whether she wants to work in films or whether she wants to stay in the school. Although my father pleaded, saying this is just a one-off thing that she's doing and it will be done during the holidays, but it fell on deaf ears and I had to leave school. So that was my debut came at a cost. So at every stage, this has happened. I've had to choose between this or that. So thank God I chose films. Not that I did. I mean, those days at 13, you don't have any options. But the parents chose it, and it opened absolutely a new world for me, and completely changed my life. So that was fantastic. And then, of course, after a few films with Rai, I finished my school. Then I wanted to continue professionally, because before that I was an amateur. I wasn't getting paid. because my father said if she's bad, don't take her. But if she's good, then it's all right. But Manikda, I remember, gave me a sari and a watch and 5,000 rupees. And I went and quickly got lots of gold. And you could get lots of gold those days. And in 59. And that was fantastic. I know my earnings, so I remember that and I've still got it. So after that, when I wanted to work professionally, but at the same time I didn't want to give up college because I did very well in history and I wanted to do history honors in Loreto. Again, I wasn't allowed to because Mother Ancilla got on my case and kept saying, you didn't come yesterday, you didn't come day before, and what will happen to your attendance? So I said, well, give me a year. No, I think you should do a pass course. I said, no, I don't want to do a pass course. I want to do an honors course. Just give me a year. But she just really nagged me and she went on and on and on. So I just threw my books at her one day. And my intention of going to college was that I didn't want to lose my peer group. Because whoever I was working with professionally, like Uttam Kumar or whoever, they were a million years older than I. I was, 15, 16, and they were 33, like beyond the pale. So, yeah. So I didn't want to do that. But Mother Ancilla, I had to see her face every morning. So finally I just fought with her and I said, I'll see after 30 years, So when I get invited to schools and colleges to talk about it, I feel very chuffed. I said, I haven't been to college, not educated as all of you. But then I found my mentors outside. I mean, education doesn't mean a wall of bricks and mortar. It's your education continues in the world. And I found them in the shapes of books, of cinema, and sometimes also real people, like Satyajit Ray, etc. So that was that. And then when I went to Hindi films with Kashmir Ki Kali, but that was also a Bengali connection because Shakti Samanta was Bengali and the writer Shochin Bhaumik was also a Bengali and a friend of my mother's. So, and Upur Shamshar was liked by people. Everybody was in love with Apurna. Apurna and Opu became heartthrob of the nation, at least Bengal.
Yeah. And by that time you also worked in Devi, so that had also added, that got a lot of international...
Absolutely. I mean, I consider Devi my best film, even now. Yeah. So then when I went to Bombay, there were many raised eyebrows. Yeah. How can Bengali girl, Satyajit Ray's fine, go and do these song and dance movies in Bombay with Shammi Kapoor at that. So there was much criticism, but for me it was going from a regional cinema to national cinema, and having said that, Bollywood has given me more visibility.
It has broadened
and a pan-Indian. And then look at the, when you see the title later, it's from every corner of India with so many different surnames. So Bollywood, I mean, we called it Indian cinema, Hindi cinema. That atmosphere was a kind of
microcosm of
yes,
India.
Absolutely, of India. So many people. So it was a wonderful learning experience. And thanks to Bollywood, I have traveled in India because now all of them go to wherever in Edinburgh or Marrakesh but actually there is a reason for it, because all our spaces have been taken, it's so crowded, there's people everywhere. So where can you set a camera and look at a vista? I mean, you really have to go miles away, and where there is no place for the actors to stay. I mean, I remember when I came here to shoot for Dag in Shimla and Chel, I mean, there was no decent hotel as such. Of course, Clark's and, Oberoi hotels were there in Shimla. But we roughed it out. But today's generation is so spoiled. I mean, they're used to air conditioning, they're used to limos, they're used to, their entourage consists of 2-3, huge entourage. I believe Ranveer moves with 12 people, there's a
There are vans,
masseuse, yes, somebody to massage and somebody to train. Yeah, they have trainers, personal trainers. We had no such. We had our hairdresser, of course, and the makeup man was the company makeup man. And my mother didn't chaperone me because she had other children and she stayed back in Calcutta. And that was another thing very different, because those days all the heroines were chaperoned, and they usually wore white, and of course they didn't drink or smoke, and they were very virtuous. I mean, whatever they were on screen, they were like that in real life. I remember working in Kashmir Ki Kali, my first film, which I loved, and I tried so hard to, because everybody was saying, oh God, your Hindi is so Bengali-ish, and of course dancing, and playback singer was such a challenge, because somebody else singing and you have to do lip sync, which was very alien. So I was stiff as a cardboard, but when I look back, all I can see is there's a lot of innocence. The camera really picks up, all those qualities. But what was I going to say about Kashmir? I've forgotten. Yes, the dancing was, so I tried my best to be sexy, but couldn't. But I really embraced the whole Bollywood thing. I didn't want to, Aparna Sen came to work in Hindi films and she ran away because she says, I can't do this. It's completely contrary to what, but I went with it. So whatever they wanted me to do, I did it.
In fact, you did a tremendous job of it. By evening in Paris, you were doing Le Ja, Le Ja, Le Ja Mera Dil.
Yes, yes. It was, we had gone to Paris and I walked on Champs-Élysées with my red Carrara and all that, and stopped traffic. When people sort of really looked and said, what is happening? Yes, that was a lovely... But again, and that time I had met Tiger, because this is in 64 now we are talking about, and Tiger was playing for Sussex, and he had broken a finger. So he came to Paris, where we were shooting for Evening in Paris. And because he couldn't play cricket for 2 weeks because the thumb or finger had to heal. And my unit was very upset that it's our girl, our unit girl is going around with somebody who's not ours, it's somebody else. They just couldn't cope with it. And nobody talked to me. Nobody talked to me. Can you imagine? Okay. So I was staying at George Sand, so I moved from there to where the hairdressers and the other unit members stayed. And but after I got engaged and I had that ring on my finger, everything was changed. Then I was part of then I was welcomed, But that courtship period, they were because everybody became my parents, They said, well, we have control over you. You can't do this. So, yeah, things were very different. And now the mindset is so much, and also the concept of getting married when you are working, when you're at the top of your profession. They said it will be like committing harakiri. Nobody will see your films. And then when I wanted to, be a mother, then again I got a lot of advice that this is not the right time. Aradhana is just released, you will lose. And yes, I had to give up a lot of films, like Tere Mere Sapne, Hathi Mere Sathi, Khilona. They all went on to become very big hits. But you have to prioritize. At least I have led my life according to my priorities. Because I'm just one person and there are so many out there. If I try to please my audience, which is many, then what will happen to me? And they see me on the screen, they don't really know who I am. So you have to choose. And my choice has always been family oriented and not individual oriented. Because I grew up in a joint family And that's what I knew, and I wanted a family of my own, and I didn't want it at a very late stage. I wanted, they were really superstars, you know. We used to get mobbed everywhere, which wasn't a very pleasant thing.
There was an aura about all of it, which has gone
Yes, because
sort of...
they couldn't, and they used to line up for watching queue up for a new release. But the downside of that was, if 3 or 4 big films were ready, say Dilip Kumar, Devanand, Raj Kapoor, B.R. Chopra, Shantaram, these were the big names, Chopra Saab. So, you know, if those were ready, a small film couldn't get a release. Now, thank God, because of the multiplexes and the money being in place, because we used to work in 3 or 4 films at a time. Because, you know, we'd shoot for one, say this month, and then 6 months later we would shoot again. So the film took, say, 3-4 years to be made, unless again you were a Raj Kapoor or Shantaram. That got, those films got ready on time. But smaller films, like Aradhna was a small film, because Rajesh Khanna was just introduced, and I was an okay actor, but not that level. But, and Shakti ji did that because Shammi Kapoor's dates were not available. So he thought he'll make a quickie, you know, with us, because I'd already, you know, he introduced me to the cinema, and to Hindi cinema, and he felt that I owed him, and I did owe him. So I gave him those dates, and Aradhna was made with very little money, and it became an enormous hit. So just shows that sometimes, you know, what you can miscalculate, even people like Shakti Samanta. And I remember very well the first scene of Aradhna, when I'm shown as the old woman, with very bad makeup, by the way. I mean, you could see that. But anyway, those days people were not so judgmental. Now, now the audience knows so much about filmmaking. Acha, ye to long shot tha, isme editing theek nahi hai. You know, they make very expert comments. But anyway, they accept it. So when I'm shown for the first time, and the entire audience starts laughing. And at that point, Shakti ji left the theatre. He said, ye to gaya. You know, there's no chance of this film. But at the end of the scene, which took about 2 minutes, you know, you could hear sniffling in the audience, you could make out people were crying. So somebody ran behind Shakti ji and said, please come back, it's all right, it's okay. And it's incredible that wherever you are in India, you know, we talk about states being different from each other, and Chennai was going through that time, anti-Hindi, and they were not speaking, and there were violent protests about Hindi, and Aradhna ran for 50 weeks. So how do you explain that? And despite our differences, I think our commonalities in India is so much at that emotional level, and Bollywood does touch upon that, and it is secular. So far it is secular. I don't know whether that will change. Might change, it's beginning to change, but so far, and at that time it was very secular, and whether you are in Assam or whether you are in Bombay or whether you are in Srinagar or wherever you may be, people cry at the same place, people laugh at the same place, people get bored at the same place.
They sing the same songs.
Singing the same songs, whether they can speak the language or not. I mean, that is true, I mean, because in other places, because our films were very popular in Egypt, in Russia, and
you have
South
this
Africa.
wonderful experience in South Africa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, South Africa. I don't know from where to where we've come. I don't know where you happened to your question. In South Africa, we always felt, at least I always felt, because of my Bengali upbringing and initially being debuted by Satyajit Ray. So I had a more elevated expectation of myself. And I would say all these popular Hindi cinema is a bit, I do it for money or I do it for friends. There was a kind of apologetic behavior, which I've got over, by the way. So that was there. And then when I went to South Africa, immediately, 94, we were allowed, otherwise our passport didn't allow us to go there. We went, and we went to Durban, we went to Joburg, we went to other places, and everywhere people came and met me and said, and you can always make out when they're faking and when they're actually real, they said that, you know, you were our connection to India, because we were not allowed to go to India. So every Sunday we used to dress up. And at that time, I think Sharmila Tagore was there on the screen very much. So they used to go and see my films and feel that connection with India. And I felt so humbled. I said, you know, if I've been able to do that,
Yeah.
you know, that is something.
Absolutely. Says a
So
lot
look at
about
the reach. So Hindi cinema is very layered, you know, because there's the storytelling maybe in your face, and storytelling could be exaggerated, but they do put their point across.
Yeah.
And in our time, the emotion was the big thing. Okay, you can say that it was very male-centric, and the male gaze prevailed.
Yeah.
That has changed now. But even, like say Amar Prem, for instance, if I became a very famous singer, you know, the film may not have run. But because I suffered and because the reading of Amar Prem, I would say, is that you have a biological family who is not there for you, but then you create another family. You have a son who's not really your son, but who really looks after you. Somebody, a man who's not really your husband or any relation of yours, looks after your emotional needs. So I think that's the subtext of the film, and that is what resonates, and that is why it's had such a long shelf life. So it's not so easy to read Hindi cinema, and I think the producers also have a wonderful way of, despite the censorship, despite the, like I said earlier, the heroine had to be very virtuous.
Yeah.
And again, they were very simple. You had to be sexy, of course. That was a given. You had to be sexy. But at the same time, you had to be very naive and innocent. It was difficult stuff,
absolutely.
but we did it. And so that was the expectation of the audience. So she couldn't be like do something wrong.
Yeah.
People wouldn't accept that. So the vamp.
Yeah.
So the vamps were very important, and Helen, like, she had all the fun part. I mean, she wore interesting clothes, and she did all this dancing, and she was the energy, you know. So one was a little envious of that. And they had names like Lily and Susie and Rosie, and they lived in dark places like nightclubs, and of course they loved the hero and sacrificed for the hero. Then came the storytelling part, where one producer woke up one day and said, hey, how about making the heroine as a vamp and the good girl, you know, Sita or Geeta, and in Evening in Paris, then I'm the bad girl and the good girl, so I get to do Le Ja, Le Ja, Le Ja Mera Dil, and also do the hand-wringing, copious tears bit also. So they managed to tell their stories. So I think it's a great industry that has given us so many. And when you go back during the studio times, Devika Rani times, because they made their films made their money from mythological films and devotional films. So they were all educated, Himanshu Rai and in Prabhat Studio in Pune, new theatres. So they made Achut Kanya, which you can't even, the title would not be accepted. It will not go beyond the censors or whoever chops and changes. So Achut Kanya wouldn't be accepted. So Duniya Na Mane, such a forward-looking film. So they did that, and then of course the wars came, the values were changed, black money entered the industry, the star system came. Ashok Kumar probably was his kismat ran for 2 years, and then came Dilip Kumar who portrayed that kind of dichotomy, who was an undecided person between romantic, and then Raj Kapoor was the idealist, the Nehruvian views, social views. And Devanand was the underbelly and showing the angst of the partition. So these three stayed for a very long time. And then came the Chinese aggression, war, whatever you call it. There are many army people here. So whatever the correct thing about the China aggression is. So that, there was a lot of unemployment, there was a lot of shortage of food at that time. So Indian cinema became escapist with a vengeance. They went to the hills with 6 songs. Kashmir Ki Kali is an example. Shammi Kapoor was that time. So that happened in the 60s. And then towards the end was that romance period with Rajesh Khanna and others started. That was all right. The 70s was a very interesting time because when the Pune graduates had come out like Shabana, Nasiruddin, Jaya Bachchan, etc. Jaya Bhaduri then.
Yeah, the directors Kumar Shani,
yes, and Vidhu Vinod
Chopra,
Chopra,
the new cinema.
New cinema. So the parallel cinema started with Shyam Benegal and Ankur and all that. And then there was End of Romance and Angry Young Man. So the heroines were not so important anymore. The moral core became the mother. So then Nirupa Roy's reign started in 70s. And then there was another interesting niche with Bashu Chatterjee, Bashu Bhattacharya,
Gulzar.
Rajni Gandha, Gulzar. And they were showing another kind of boy next door, and Rishikesh Mukherjee. So that was very interesting. And 80s were the pits because TV had arrived and nobody was going to see the cinema till they changed into Dolby Sound and, got the audience in. So the gentry had stopped seeing cinema. And there were rapes galore in the 80s. And the women were really depicted very badly in the 80s. And then, of course, the 90s with the opening up of the economy, the NRIs became wonderful. I remember in Aradhana, there's a shot when Air India lands and this guy arrives from London or wherever, and the first thing he does is to rape somebody. So the foreigners were very disliked, or people were suspicious of them. But come 90s, they became
because we had to cater to an audience.
Great. So the push and pull of globalization made cinema very traditional. So Main Aapke Hai Kaun, Hum Hai Saath Saath, the tikas became big and everybody was smiling. So that was the time. And then of course now it's opened up and money plays a big part because now a film starts and finishes. And everybody works in one film at a time. And so they can maintain continuity. You can put on weight, you can lose weight, you can, if I had I remember when I was working in Mosam, I was doing 2 to 10 for Mosam and 7 to 2 for Farhan. So different characters, different, somebody would have longish nails, so you couldn't maintain those continuity. So this is a much better time for Indian cinema. Audience has an appetite for different narratives, there's a lot of churning, and because of the multiplexes and the money being in place, a small film like Badhai Ho or even Death in the Ganj can get a theatre release. And of course now with the Netflix, a lot of people wanting a Netflix release also, because if they don't want to come with another film which might take away the crowd, like War's collection is 51 crores in the first day. So War is again, it's a martial art and it's different kind of film. Article 15 is a different kind of film. Badhai Ho is a different kind of film. So everything is doing well. And not everything. And then you have Kabir Singh. What do you have to say about Kabir? What do you have to say about Kabir Singh? Who's seen Kabir Singh? Have you seen Kabir Singh? It boggles the mind. You should see it. And some people really defend it. I mean, the actress in question says, yes, I like being slapped around. So that's, you have to see Kabir Singh.
Yeah.
So add to their crores, because they made 300 crores.
Yeah.
So maybe another 100 crores if you support it. So, but it's an eye-opener. So, different kinds of films are being made. And the wonderful thing is that there are so many women. In my time, there was only hairdresser, and then later a few editors, and now you have assistant to DOP, assistant to directors, everywhere. TV is run by women entirely, and yet it's so regressive. It just, I don't know, which is such a layered film. And so many women directors, from Zoya to Farah to
Meghna.
Rima and Meghna and more coming,
Yes.
Alankrita. So they're bringing a different kind of the female gaze, which is different from male gaze. And so I think I'm very happy and very excited about what's happening 60 years later. Very long answer.
No, it's exactly what we were looking for. The mindset and the subjects and all we have elaborated on. I'll park one thing, like when she says she had lived her life and her films her own way. It says a lot about somebody at the age of 25 to act mother to Rajesh Khanna. We'll park that for a later time. But one of the changes you must have seen is in the working conditions, the kind of environment you worked in and the kind of environment you see now people working in, like you have mentioned.
The floor of the studio was uneven, full of potholes, making a simple trolley shot almost impossible. And talking about Satyajit Ray, he didn't have enough lights, what he wanted. And he was competing with that kind of minimal resources with the best in the world, with Kurosawa in Japan, with Bergman in Sweden. So he had to improvise. And his DOP improvised this bounce light, which everybody uses now. Yeah. And the projection, the back projection in Nayok, how Subrato filmed it. You cannot tell that it was all done in the studio with that kind of. And also you ran because in Calcutta those days we used to have power cuts, and
you could awful, and so many others. And now even a newcomer has this fancy van. We didn't have all that. Then commuting, like coming to, again, this side, we used to go to Kashmir twice a year. And Indian films gave so much visibility to Kashmir that everybody felt that this is our land. But unfortunately, we never really gave visibility to Kashmiris. I think we could have done that also. Then maybe there wouldn't have been this kind of disconnect with Kashmiris. And in our films also, which I forgot to mention earlier, when we were making, you would remember Chaudhry Ka Chand and any other film, there would always be two characters, either Sardars or a Muslim character who were good friends and again who sacrificed for the hero. And this created empathy.
Yeah.
This created empathy and now all that is absent. And the rural India, the digitally deprived India, the poverty-stricken India, illiterate India is completely absent from our media, from our mainstream cinema, definitely not even in television, not even in news, right? Unless some mishap happens like floods or earthquake or something. But the small towns have come up, like Bareilly Ki Barfi or Newton, and there we see the small town. But sadly, the rural India has disappeared, and those empathetic characters have disappeared. Now it's become very, earlier in our time we wrung our hands and we were helpless, but the content was very Indian, if I can make that distinction. And because today's generation of directors, everybody, I was the only one who used to speak in English on the set once upon a time, and maybe Tanu. And everybody else spoke in Hindi. And our dialogue writers were mainly Urdu, you know, whether it's Kaifi Saab or whether it's, you know, many. They were all, so there was this wonderful Hindustani language, which was so beautiful. Now that has been replaced by English. So now it's the English is the spoken word. And अच्छा बोलते हिंदी नहीं आप English में बोल दीजिए, you know. And the script would arrive in, thanks to computer, in English, in Roman language. So it's very difficult, you know. Devanagari में पढ़ो तो but these guys don't know Devanagari. So it's a very westernized, oriented people who are making films. So something subtle, not ostensibly so, but something subtle has changed, which has made them, the emotions have made them less Indian, less, you know, at a multiplex level it's all right, but the single screen rebel is all violence and all action films. But the emotion, of course, Pankaj Tripathi is my god, I just love him, and others are, I mean, that Masan, for instance, was an Indian film. So, but more or less everything is very slick, you know, that is also happening. So there are some goods and there are some bad, but the loss is the language. I really mourn the language.
And the inclusiveness of, say, Amar Akbar Antony, and the inclusiveness that,
you know, because now the, you know, many trends have happened, and now the trend is ultra-nationalist films, like Uri, like
Batla House.
Yeah, Batla House perhaps. So these are the films that are guaranteed to be okay. So producers are investing more. But on the other hand, Article 15 has done well, Dream Girl has done well. I mean, Ayushmann Khurrana's whatever, he just comes and stands and the film does well. But the budget is small. The budget can't be Uri budget. The budget can't be war budget. So that kind of money it is still not making. So everything does come down to economics. So write down whatever the people are wanting. If they are wanting ultranational films, so we will give them ultranational films.
With all these changes that have happened in the last 60 years, do you think Indian cinema, particularly Hindi cinema, we to sort of make that mistake of calling Indian cinema Hindi cinema, we have not yet crossed over internationally like say Chinese or Japanese cinema have crossed over? Do you think
even Korean cinema?
Even Korean cinema for that matter, you know, like not to speak of Swedish or Italian cinema, but why do you think is that? You know, like we seem to be restricted to...
It's a good question, but again I think it is perhaps because as a jury member when I have seen films, foreign films, it is like say Nuri Belji's film Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is very true to the narrative. The people, the location, the language, everything merges together and creates this entity. Even the photography, even the pace of the film is of that place. The Korean films, of course, have some violent films, but they also have their distinct quality, distinct identity. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert. I've not really thought about this, but our films are. See, Mother India and Lagan that got nominated earlier had again that kind of Indianness to it, right? Whereas, you know, Gully Boy, for instance, it's a very, I mean, I love the film. It's a wonderful film, which has been nominated from us to go to Oscar. But it's, I mean, America has seen films like that because of the black identity. You know, they could easily think, "Ye humne dekha hai with the black community." You know, maybe. So I don't see it as an Indian film. I don't know why. I mean, I've not been able to explain. Whereas people like Rai, people like Ghatak, they could have an enthusiastic conversation with their audience at home and abroad. They could have a simultaneous conversation which transcended cultural barriers and language barriers, and yet reached out at an emotional level. That is why the trilogy still remains one of the best 100 films.
Yeah, absolutely.
It continues to remain that.
Yeah.
So I don't think you have to think Indian. Like Girish Karnad completely, all the time, every lecture, he would say, what is Indian? Now we have so many languages. We have somehow English has become the link language. I can speak Bengali, I can write Bengali, I can read Bengali. But many of this generation cannot write and read their own language, So I think maybe it comes from there, because my core is, I still say my tables in Bengali.
Yeah.
That's how Bengali I am. So I think that millennials and others are more a result of a global influence. They could be global citizen. And those kind of films are seen at cinema festivals. So when they're giving a foreign language film, they're looking for something different. I don't know if that's correct. I'm sure somebody will have other ideas. This is the best I can.
It is quite disappointing that for 30 years now we haven't had a film shown in the...
I'm sure that will change. Yeah. I'm sure that will change. Because another thing is that Chinese don't have a captive audience at home.
Yeah.
The Chinese, the good films are different. They don't have a theatre release at home. The martial cinema is more popular there, right? And so Iran doesn't have a captive audience at home.
Yeah.
But we have a captive audience at home. So we make essentially films for our captive audience. So we don't really make films for the international audience. So if somebody can really transcend that barrier of becoming really Indian or unique or in nature, maybe that will get her. But then you have to think like that. You have to be like that. I think thinking is the most valuable skill that we have, and we should really teach our children to think. Because now there's a WhatsApp studio out there, a WhatsApp university out there, so which discourages in-depth learning, right? And there's fake news. It should be dealt as an epidemic, as a health crisis. The kind of people who buy, Blue Whale, for instance, does not exist, did not exist, but people believe it did. So there's so much out there that India is facing. So I think fake news and WhatsApp university, at least the children, the parents have to be very sure that the information that is coming at them, that you have to unpack and make it so. You cannot be a passive recipient of images. We are surrounded by screens. And if you become passive recipient of images, then you are in trouble. You have to learn how to question. You have to say, if this is the theory, does the theory hold? If the theory doesn't hold, then what is the counter-argument? So you have to really think like that to exist in today's world in India. You cannot accept every printed word as gospel truth.
In fact, now that you bring this up, and one of your major interests of late has been, how we are dealing with our children, what kind of environment that has also changed over these last 60 years. And children these days, as you have mentioned often, have this anxiety, this depression, and
both mother and child. I think this is a definitely far more anxious generation because the environment is so uncertain that it is very difficult to bring up a child. You don't know what is the enabling environment, what is the right thing to say. Do you want to make him, with homeschooling, in such a way that they can't deal with the outside world and the outside. So one thing is very clear, that today's children cannot be shaped by parents alone. They will be shaped by many other influences that are out there, that you cannot avoid them. And today, children are from their laptop screen to from their mobiles, they're looking down more than looking up. Even if they're going for a drive, they're on the phone instead of seeing the living theatre out there. So to give that impetus, to give that core values, empathy, civility, which you cannot learn from social media, the value of cooperativeness, patience, tolerance. Now these things will come from the family. The joint family, my cultural orientation, that has disappeared totally. So family is the first influence, then comes school, then comes state, then comes the community, then state, and then comes the social media. So social media is something that you really have to look at. And even children, parents are giving them the iPad so that the child can eat. So and eating is a social thing. We should learn how to eat together. At the moment you don't eat together, you take your plate and watching TV, and somebody is taking their plate and doing their laptop work, then it's getting fragmented, So it starts from there. And those likes and dislikes on the social media mean so much. These young people are constantly looking for peer approval and peer acceptance.
And from strangers, unknown people,
Sort of. So they're, and although they are digital natives in no time, they are privy to so much information, but their sense of self is still very fragile. And again, there is no alternative to that. It's the human touch. And it is no longer command and control. It has to be dialogues and negotiated space, relationship between child. I think they're asking us to stop. Thank you.
It could have gone on for another hour, I think, but we'll take a few questions.
Then we would have been booed out.
So we'll take a few questions if anybody has.
Hello.
I hope it's a question that I can answer.
Hello.
Mike.
Hello.
My age Sagar, my name. I am your fan, right from my school days, I can say. And still. And I think your son studied with my son Snar for a short while, because that was when Farouk's son was also there. That was a small time meeting. But the way you have narrated everything, I must congratulate you. I went to the bookshop. I said, is there any book which Sharmila ji has come out with a book like 60 years of, which I suggest you should come out with.
Absolutely, I've
and
been
you
telling
spoke
her
very
for a
well.
long list.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, I have a small question. You have been there on the censor boards. In the age of internet, you find this relevance of censor boards still there?
No, I think you're right that it's becoming, it's not very important. It's not internet, of course, everybody can see everything, and the moment you put some restrictions, everybody makes it a point to see it. True, but sometimes, I don't know, it's a mystery, but everybody does want that censor certificate. And actually, the word is not censor. Tenure was 7 years, and I went blue in the face trying to say it is not censor board, it is CBFC, Central Board of Film Certification, right? So, but censor board has stuck. Even my office used to pick up the phone and said censor board. I said, no, it's not censor board. So CBFC is basically a certification body, and every country has it, So we have it, and I, during my time, tried to give it,
deal with it by giving it proper certificates. But only, I mean, that's going to take very long, this question. But you know, like the posters are printed before the certificate is given. So the certificate is, whether it's A or UA, is not on the poster. So the audience doesn't have that information. Whether this requires parental guidance or not. But why is it so? Because everybody comes last minute for the certification, because otherwise there's leak in the censor board, as you're saying. So the word of mouth will say this is rubbish film. And they feel that will affect their, the distributors will get panicky, people won't release it in other theatres. So there are lots of, like anything in India, nothing is easy. It looks, for you to make that comment, which is a very correct comment. So being in the media for that long and being involved with, you have to bring your own perception to it, and which I did. I saw CBFC as an enabling body between the civil society on one hand, government on the other hand, and the film industry on the other hand. It is an arm of INB. But you can, if INB has a paranoia about something, you can pick up the phone and speak to the minister or the undersecretary or somebody from whoever will take your call to say that there is nothing to worry about. There was a film called Lalu Prasad Yadav. And my regional officer came and said, no, we must stop this film. I said, but why should we stop it? Arey, ye to bahut politically volatile film hai. I said, it's a rubbish film. Audience will reject it. Nobody will see it more than 3 days. And that's what happened. But you have to assure the minister that it can go. Because if it doesn't go, a lot of people lose money. Fridays are very important for a film. And then when they create this obstacle at the last minute, the industry loses money. So I'm a part of the industry. I don't want the industry to lose money. Yes, we do, because we have such very mischievous films that come to us, which you won't be privy to see. It's not, everything is not Padmavat or, big films. There are many films which I tell you, and where I've had advisory board. I created and I called, there was a film on homosexuality, and I invited Ashok Rao Kavi. I said, what would you do with this film? He said, I would ban it, because it was everything. It was so anti-homosexual. Then there was another film which said Maharashtra is only for Maharashtrians. And it was a big budget film. So I called Chitra Palekar, Amol Palekar's first wife. I called Nana Patekar, who didn't turn up, but another Marathi playwright came. I said, what would you do this film? They said, we would ban it. I mean, these are all committed, non-censor types. They were so offended by the film. So there are films like that. So by and large, you're right, it's a game. In my time, I think I managed to walk that tightrope quite well. But what happened was there was street censorship. Jodha Akbar, we gave it a okay. Then they were challenged that from Manipur to everywhere. Then that Dan Brown film, we okayed it, but it created a law and order problem, because law and order comes under it's a state subject, right? So there was a law and order problem, it was created, and Nagaland stopped it, Punjab stopped it, where there is no Christians as such, and Hyderabad stopped it. So what are we going to surmise from that? Who were they trying to please? So things happen. So the more I became, me meaning my team became liberal, the more problem was created by elsewhere. So this is a difficult subject.
Sharmila ji, I have one quick one, because you touched upon the very, very important aspect of thinking. And with thinking comes the writing. You were talking about films and how films were written beautifully with people like F.E. Saab and so on. If you take that time and then films now, the good ones are incredibly well written. Just to take an example of a recent Bengali film, Bhuter Bhavishyat.
Yes.
Now, Bhuter Bhavishyat, it's in iambic pentameter. The ghosts actually speak in rhyme. So, I was telling my friends when they were watching it, and the subtitling was terrible because the rhyme scheme and the thing wasn't there. Talk a little bit about the writing aspect of it, because it's such an important backbone to a good cinema. And also I remember, in fact, you talked about Satyajit Ray. Remember Amita Malik's famous interview with Akira Kurosawa and Satyajit Ray? It was a master class of elegant film appreciation in a language which was not convoluted. But I do want you to talk about the writing of it.
No, that's also will take too long, but just very briefly that yes, there are good writers and bad writers. Some producers are there, they consider it as a business, so they, they just sign a big star, and then writing is incidental, or it's got double meaning and innuendos, and depends on the imagination of the director. And some stress on the writing, like again I would come back to Death in the Ganj. I don't know how many people of you seen it, which was made by Aparna Sen's daughter, Konkona Sen. I suggest you see it. Minimal dialogues, but very like Manikda's language. He liberates films from dialogues. He does it with music, and when the dialogue is there, the impact is tremendous, because it's, I can recite Upur Shamshar dialogues, which are Tomar chokhe ki ache bolo, kajol, these are impactful dialogues. So we have to go now, bye, otherwise they'll kill us.